The dark truth behind the world's worst maximum security prisons. From ADX Florence to Tocorón. The leak in the fortress. You think you've seen the inside of a prison? Subscribe now, because what you're about to enter is a world of concrete, wire, and secrets you were never meant to know. The desert night around Florence, Colorado, was bitterly cold and silent except for the crunch of tires on gravel. A Bureau of Prisons transport van turned off Highway 67 and rolled through a series of steel gates toward a compound that looked more like a missile silo than a penitentiary. Guard towers loomed against the stars. Floodlights cast pale circles on endless layers of fencing. This was ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, built to bury America's most dangerous men in total isolation. Inside the van sat investigative journalist Emily Vega. She wasn't under arrest. She was part of a rare, tightly controlled media tour of the prison's outer perimeter, a visit she'd been trying to arrange for over a year. Her assignment had started as a profile of high-security facilities for a European outlet, but it had turned into something bigger, a transnational investigation into how so-called supermax prisons function and fail. Through the van's narrow window she saw a row of barren exercise pens, each a concrete box with a chain-link roof open to a slice of sky. She'd seen similar ones in leaked photos of Pelican Bay's SHU and more recently of Tocorón Prison in Venezuela. Though Tocorón's images had shocked her even more. Swimming pools, bars, even a mini-zoo inside what was supposed to be a maximum security facility. The contrast between the two extremes fascinated her. How could one model aim for total sensory deprivation while the other allowed inmates to run a parallel city inside its walls? Her guide, a stony-faced bureau official named Jeffries, recited statistics in a monotone as they walked past security checkpoints. Number of cells, average time in isolation, categories of inmates. But Emily's eyes were drawn to a bulletin board of incident reports. Most were routine, contraband confiscation, minor assaults, but one header stopped her cold: legal mail alert, coordinated codes. It referenced both ADX and Pelican Bay. She asked about it. Jeffries stiffened. That's nothing for you to worry about. He ushered her along. Back in Washington, D.C., an NGO researcher named Carla Jimenez was tracking something similar. Encrypted messages circulating on social networks linked to Venezuelan gangs. One phrase kept repeating, La Foundation. It was slang for the foundation, but also the name of a wing at Tocorón Prison. Carla had grown up in Aragua State, where the Tren de Aragua megagang had used Tocorón as its headquarters until a dramatic 2023 raid. From that base, leaders had allegedly ordered kidnappings and extortions across several countries, even as guards stayed at the perimeter. Now new leaks suggested the gang still had a communication pipeline, perhaps even reaching inmates in the U.S. Emily's tour of ADX ended in a sterile visiting room where she was shown a handful of non-sensitive documents. But while the official stepped out, a correctional officer she didn't recognize slipped her a folded page. "You're looking at the wrong walls," it read. "Check Tocorón. Codes match." She looked up, but the officer was gone. That night in her hotel, Emily compared the page to public blueprints of Tocorón published after the 2023 raid. The symbols lined up with known smuggling routes inside the Venezuelan prison. Tunnels, hidden storerooms, cell blocks controlled by the gang. She felt a chill. This wasn't some crackpot conspiracy. The symbols matched patterns she'd already been seeing in the mail alerts at ADX and Pelican Bay. Meanwhile in Caracas, Carla received a call from a confidential source. Something's moving from Tocorón to the north. Same codes. Same hands. She opened an encrypted folder and found scanned envelopes from inmates in both countries. Each bore identical markings disguised as legal notations. The next morning Emily returned to ADX to request a follow-up interview. She was denied. Security had tightened overnight due to what the Bureau called an unverified threat. At Pelican Bay, administrators ordered a review of all outgoing mail after a guard found a cipher taped under a cell desk in the SHU. And in Venezuela, local journalists reported that despite the 2023 raid, Tren de Aragua members still held sway over parts of Tocorón, moving contraband phones and cash. Emily flew to Miami to meet Carla in person. They spread out their evidence on a cafe table. Photos of Pelican Bay's exercise cages, ADX fiber optic schematics, Tocorón smuggling maps. Together they traced the codes. Each string led not to an escape plan but to financial accounts and names of shipping companies. The pattern suggested a multinational smuggling network using prisons as command centers, the very places built to stop such activity. As they compared notes, Emily's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered. A distorted voice said, "You're connecting dots you can't protect. La Foundation isn't just in Venezuela. It's in your backyard." Then the line went dead. That night in her Miami hotel room, Emily opened her email to find a new attachment. A high-resolution photo of Tocorón's main yard taken after the raid. In the center, circled in red, was a crate stamped with a U.S. contractor's logo, the same company that had done wiring work at ADX Florence. On the back of the photo someone had typed, "When you open the next door, the walls will talk." Emily stared at the screen, her heartbeat drumming in her ears. If the photo was real, it meant the supply chain between two of the world's most notorious prisons was deeper than anyone had imagined, and possibly sanctioned by people far above the inmates. She printed the photo, slid it into her folder, and whispered, "What door?" The next morning she and Carla would fly to California to visit Pelican Bay. But as she zipped her bag, a news alert flashed on her phone. Violent riot erupts at Tocorón Prison hours after secret documents leak online. The story had just crossed a line from investigation to crisis. The riot and the codes. The plane touched down through a bank of coastal fog. Emily Vega peered out at the jagged pines lining California's north coast and tried to still her racing thoughts. She and Carla Jimenez had landed in Crescent City, home to Pelican Bay State Prison, the place where decades of solitary confinement and hunger strikes had written a chapter of U.S. penal history. Just hours earlier, Venezuelan media had gone live with shaky phone videos from Tocorón Prison. Inmates flooding the yard, smoke rising from makeshift kitchens, guards standing at the perimeter. A riot had erupted just as Emily received that ominous photo. At the rental car desk, Carla scrolled her phone, reading updates. "Government says Tocorón's under control," she murmured, "but look at this." She handed Emily a clip from an investigative site in Caracas. It showed prisoners running past an empty cage that had once housed exotic animals, then panning to crates marked with U.S. contractor logos identical to the one circled in Emily's photo. "They're still moving goods," Carla whispered. Even after the raid. Driving north toward Pelican Bay, Emily watched the mist swallow the road. She thought of the hunger strikes in 2011 and 2013, when thousands of inmates across California stopped eating to protest indefinite SHU confinement. Despite round-the-clock monitoring, the strikes had spread through messages smuggled in legal mail and coded notes, forcing legislative hearings. If that was possible under such restrictions, she wondered, what could a transnational gang do with corrupt contacts and modern technology? They reached the prison just as a cold drizzle began. From the outside, Pelican Bay's SHU was stark and unremarkable. Low concrete buildings, razor wire, and guard towers under a slate-gray sky. Inside, the warden's conference room was lined with framed commendations and an American flag. Emily had arranged a routine interview about reforms, but when she asked about the mail ciphers, the air chilled. "We don't comment on ongoing investigations," the warden said. "All mail is screened according to policy." But Carla noticed a file folder on the table labeled, "Legal Mail Alert, ADX/Tocorón." When the meeting ended, a junior officer caught up with them in the hallway. "You're looking at coded markings?" he asked quietly. "Check cell block D. There's something you should see." He led them past rows of windowless cells to a small evidence locker. Inside lay a seized envelope from a recent legal mail sweep. On the outside, harmless legal notations. On the inside, a diagram of a shipping container yard in Puerto Cabello, Venezuela's main port. Handwritten across the bottom, La Foundation, Phase 3. Emily snapped photos, her hands trembling. "These aren't escape plans," she whispered. "They're logistics routes." Carla nodded grimly. "And they're using the very channels created to protect attorney-client privilege. That's why it's so hard to stop." While they examined the envelope, news alerts continued to flash on Carla's phone. The Tocorón riot was worsening. Venezuelan officials reported contraband phones and weapons seized, but unconfirmed footage showed inmates still roaming free in parts of the compound, chanting gang slogans. Among them, a banner unfurled with the same symbol Emily had seen on the blueprint from ADX. Back in Sacramento, California Department of Corrections officials held a press conference denying any active cross-border conspiracy, but admitting they were cooperating with federal partners. In Washington, a House subcommittee announced emergency hearings on security and corruption vulnerabilities in Supermax facilities. The story Emily and Carla had been piecing together for months was now national news. At dusk, the junior officer returned. "You didn't get this from me," he said, handing Emily a photocopy of an incident report from Pelican Bay dated a week earlier. It described an inmate using legal mail to transmit coded instructions linked to South American organized crime. The last line chilled her. Subject currently housed in ADX Florence, Colorado. Emily folded the paper into her coat. Rafael Salinas, she said under her breath, the same name she'd heard whispered in the ADX control room. Carla glanced at her. If he's coordinating this from inside ADX, she didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what it meant. The two most notorious prisons on the continent could be nodes in a single network. That night, in a modest motel off Highway 101, Emily spread the day's evidence across the bedspread. Pelican Bay mail ciphers, Tocorón riot footage, the ADX blueprint, the contractor crate photo. The pattern was undeniable. These weren't isolated leaks, they were signals. Someone inside multiple worst maximum security prisons was demonstrating how porous the walls really were. Carla paced the room, phone to her ear, speaking rapid Spanish to a source in Caracas. She hung up and turned pale. They're saying the riot was a diversion, she said. That shipments left Tocorón during the chaos. Emily stared at the photo of the crate. Shipments to where? As she asked, her email pinged. Another attachment. This time it was a close-up of a Pelican Bay cell door slot with a note tucked inside. On the note was a single line in block letters. When you reach the Rockies, the foundation opens. Emily looked at Carla. They're telling us to go back to Colorado, she said. Carla nodded slowly. If we do, we might be walking into their hands. Outside, the rain intensified, streaking the motel window like bars on a cell. Snowflakes drifted sideways in the pre-dawn darkness as Emily Vega and Carla Jimenez's rental SUV crept up Highway 67 toward Florence, Colorado. The mountains loomed black against a steel-gray sky. In the passenger seat, Carla stared at the anonymous note on her phone. When you reach the Rockies, the foundation opens, and tried to suppress the chill running down her spine. It felt like an invitation and a warning all at once. They had left California in a hurry after 2 days of chasing leads at Pelican Bay. The coded mail, the photocopied incident reports, the Tocorón riot footage, all of it pointed back to ADX Florence. Now, as they approached the Alcatraz of the Rockies again, Emily could see floodlights slicing through the snow and guard towers rising like chess pieces. The most secure prison in America looked unchanged, but the story surrounding it had shifted into overdrive. Since the Tocorón riot, every major outlet had run headlines about cross-border gang networks and supermax leaks. Congressional hearings had been scheduled. The Bureau of Prisons had gone into damage control. And yet the same message kept arriving: foundation. Emily parked at a gas station outside the perimeter and shut off the engine. We can't just walk in, she said quietly. They'll revoke my credentials and lock down even tighter. Carla rubbed her temples. My source says something is scheduled for today. A handoff. I don't know what it means, but if it's happening under legal mail privileges again, we won't see it unless we're inside. They spread their evidence across the dashboard. Photos of crates in Tocorón, mail ciphers from Pelican Bay, blueprints of ADX's service corridors, and the list of shipping companies encoded in the diagrams. Every arrow pointed to the same contractor, a mid-size U.S. firm that had handled wiring work in both ADX and Tocorón's pre-raid infrastructure. Emily thought of the boxes she had glimpsed on the Tocorón footage, stamped with that logo, being carried across the yard as guards stood by. They weren't just moving contraband, she murmured. They were moving blueprints. At 6:15 a.m., a black Bureau of Prisons van rolled past the gas station, headed toward the prison gate. Through its window, Emily caught a flash of orange fabric, an inmate's jumpsuit. Transfers to ADX were rare and usually at night. She grabbed her camera. Who's arriving now? Carla asked. Emily shook her head. If my notes are right, no one is supposed to. They exchanged a look. Without speaking, Emily started the SUV and followed at a distance. The van disappeared into the outer Sally Port. Emily parked on a side road where she could see the snow-covered maintenance buildings that ringed the main compound. One in particular drew her eye, a low concrete shed half buried in drifts. In her folder was a Polaroid from Tocorón showing a nearly identical structure with a red circle drawn around it. Carla noticed too. The foundation, she whispered. Inside ADX, unseen by them, Rafael Salinas sat in his cell, staring at a folded piece of paper. The last time Emily had been here, she had glimpsed his name on an incident report. Now, if her sources were right, he was the common thread between 3 prisons and 2 continents. He placed the paper into a legal envelope addressed to a law firm in Miami, Carla City, and slid it toward the slot just as a guard walked past. The envelope vanished into the cart of outgoing mail. In Washington, the House Subcommittee on Corrections was already live-streaming a hearing on security and corruption vulnerabilities in Supermax facilities. Former Pelican Bay inmates testified by video about decades in windowless cells. A human rights lawyer displayed documents from ADX's mental health lawsuit. Each image reinforced what Emily and Carla had been reporting. Supermax control was not absolute. Back at the perimeter road, Emily snapped photos of the maintenance shed. She zoomed in on the door and froze. A figure in a dark parka stepped out, glancing around before carrying a sealed box to a waiting utility truck. The logo on the box was the same contractor's emblem she had circled in her notes. "They're moving something right now," she whispered. Carla lifted her phone to film. "Should we call the bureau? If we tip them off without proof, they'll shut us out," Emily said. "We need evidence." The wind howled across the plain. Emily adjusted her lens and took rapid shots. The figure loaded the box, slammed the truck door, and drove off toward a secondary gate. Moments later, the snow intensified, blurring the view. When it cleared, the maintenance shed door stood ajar, light spilling out onto the drifts. Emily's heart hammered. "We have to see what's in there." Carla hesitated. "We're journalists, not agents." Emily looked at her. "If we walk away now, this story dies behind a press release." She zipped her coat and stepped out into the cold. The shed smelled of dust and oil. Old wiring spools lined one wall. In the corner, half covered by a tarp, sat a stack of boxes identical to the one just removed. Emily lifted the tarp and saw more contractor logos. She pulled out her phone to photograph them. As she snapped the last picture, her foot brushed against a strip of graph paper on the floor. She picked it up. Drawn on it was a map of Tocorón cell blocks with a dotted line leading to a small square labeled Phase Cuatro. At the bottom, in block letters, "The foundation is not a place. It's a network." Carla exhaled sharply. "This isn't just smuggling," she said. "It's a demonstration. They're showing they can use the same contractor infrastructure to move messages and goods between prisons." Tocorón was their proof of concept. Emily's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. She answered. A calm male voice said, "You're standing where 3 governments have stood blind. Walk out now and you'll live to report it. Stay and you'll join the story." Then the line went dead. They stared at each other. Outside, a utility truck engine roared back to life. Carla stuffed the graph paper into her bag. "We have enough," she hissed. "Let's go." Emily nodded and started toward the door, then stopped. In the doorway stood 2 uniformed officers, snow clinging to their boots, hands on their radios. "This area is restricted," one said flatly. "Step outside slowly." Emily's mind raced. If they confiscated her camera, the photos would be gone. If they arrested her, the story would never reach the public. She raised her hands. "We're journalists," she said. "We have credentials." The officer's expression didn't change. "You need to come with us." They were escorted back toward the main gate through swirling snow. In the distance, the utility truck disappeared down a service road toward the main highway. Snowflakes hissed against the officers' jackets as they marched Emily Vega and Carla Jimenez across the icy yard toward a low administrative building just inside the ADX perimeter. The gray concrete and steel around them seemed to swallow sound. Carla clutched her bag, feeling the graph paper with its dotted line burning a hole in her pocket. Emily's camera hung from her neck, still recording. Inside, the women were ushered into a windowless conference room. A large seal of the Bureau of Prisons dominated one wall. On another hung framed photographs of the facility's opening in 1994. A senior official in a dark suit entered, followed by 2 uniformed guards. "You were found in a restricted maintenance area," he said without sitting down. "Explain yourselves." Emily slid her press credentials across the table. "We're journalists investigating documented cases of cross-border smuggling and legal mail abuse at multiple prisons. We were following up on public information." The official's eyes narrowed. "You crossed a line." Carla opened her bag slowly and laid out copies of the Tocorón riot photos, the Pelican Bay cipher, and the contractor crate images. "These are not rumors," she said. "They're facts already in the public domain. We're trying to understand how your security systems are being used." The official leafed through the papers, expression unreadable. "You've stumbled into something far bigger than you realize," he said quietly. "And you're not the only ones watching." He nodded at the guards. "Release them, but escort them to the outer gate. Their credentials are revoked." As they were led back outside, Emily's phone vibrated with a new notification before the guards could confiscate it. A livestream link from an anonymous source. She tapped it. Grainy footage filled the screen. Men in orange jumpsuits in Tocoron's yard, shouting over blaring music, holding up signs. The camera zoomed on a banner painted with the same foundation symbol. Then the stream cut to black. They were deposited at the visitor parking lot just as the sun broke over the Rockies. The cold light made the prison's towers look like teeth. Emily turned to Carla. "We're out." But the story isn't. She powered off her phone to keep it from being tracked. They drove away from the compound and pulled into a rest stop on Highway 67. Carla spread the graph paper map on the hood of the car. "Look at the dotted line," she said. "It ends not inside a prison but at a port." Emily traced it. "Puerto Cabello," she murmured. "And here Houston. They're showing us the route." Carla's eyes darkened. During the Tocorón riot, shipments left under cover of chaos. If those boxes we saw at ADX were part of it, she let the sentence trail off. Emily finished it. Then Supermax facilities have been turned into message relays for a transnational smuggling network. They both knew from the historical record how porous the system could be. Court filings from Operation Black Widow had documented Nuestra Familia leaders directing murders from Pelican Bay's SHU. Amnesty International reports had described contraband phones found even in isolation cells. Tocorón had been infamous for its nightclubs, VIP suites, and weapon stockpiles. None of this was speculation, it was all on the record. Carla pulled out her laptop and opened an encrypted chat with her Caracas source. "What's happening now?" she typed. A reply came almost instantly, unconfirmed. "Crates on trucks with U.S. contractor logos left Tocorón last night. Destination unknown." Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. "We can't just write an article. We need to hand this to people who can actually act." Carla looked at her. "Like who?" "Law enforcement already knows parts of this. They're either complicit or overwhelmed." The wind whipped across the rest stop, rattling the car's antenna. Emily stared at the graph paper. "Then we expose everything at once. Documents, photos, routes. Publish the whole investigation before they can bury it." Carla hesitated. "If we're wrong about any detail," Emily cut her off, "we use only what's documented. No speculation." They packed up and drove to a small co-working space in Denver where Emily sometimes worked. As soon as they logged onto a secure connection, they began uploading their files to multiple outlets and NGOs simultaneously. Tocorón riot footage. Pelican Bay legal mail ciphers. ADX maintenance photos. Contractor invoices. Graph paper diagrams. Every file labeled with its public source. While the uploads progressed, Emily drafted a cover letter. "This investigation reveals how 3 of the world's most notorious maximum security prisons, ADX Florence, Pelican Bay and Tocorón, have become unwitting nodes in a cross-border smuggling network exploiting legal and construction channels. All documents attached are from verified sources or official filings." Carla glanced at the screen. "Once this is out, there's no going back," she said. Emily hit send. An hour later, their phones buzzed simultaneously. Major outlets were already picking up the story. Headlines blared: "Leak links Supermax prisons to cross-border smuggling, Foundation network exposed, from Colorado to Venezuela, how maximum security failed." Twitter and Telegram flooded with hashtags. Families of inmates posted their own stories. Lawmakers demanded an emergency briefing. Emily sat back trembling. "It's out," she whispered. "They can't stop it now." Carla exhaled, but her relief was tempered by fear. "We just painted a target on ourselves," she said. "Whoever orchestrated this demonstration, inmate, contractor, gang, they wanted the world to see. Now we're the messengers." Emily's laptop pinged again, a new email with no subject line. She opened it. Inside was a single sentence: "The Foundation was never ours to open." They exchanged a look. Outside, the sun was climbing, melting the snow on the streets of Denver, but Emily felt the temperature drop. If the leak had been orchestrated from inside, then they had just triggered the final stage of someone else's plan. Emily Vega stared at the blank email window, the cryptic line, "The Foundation was never ours to open," still glowing on her screen. Outside the co-working space, the Denver streets bustled as if nothing had happened. But she and Carla knew the files they had just released were already reshaping the conversation about Supermax prisons on both sides of the equator. Her phone vibrated with news alerts. Justice Department orders independent review of ADX and Pelican Bay security. Venezuelan authorities deny U.S. contractor links to Tocorón. Lawmakers call for immediate ban on indefinite solitary confinement. The public was finally looking at the places she had spent her career trying to describe. Windowless cells, dog-run exercise pens, legal male abuses, hunger strikes, riots. It was all real. It had all been documented. But until now, it had been scattered across lawsuits and reports that few read. Carla closed her laptop. "We should leave Denver," she said quietly. "For a while." Emily nodded but kept scrolling. Her encrypted chat with a source inside ADX showed a new message, a photograph of an empty concrete cell. On the floor, written in pencil, were 3 words, "Fault lines exposed." The meaning was clear. Whoever had orchestrated the mail codes and the leaks was finished, or at least claiming to be. There was no evidence of an escape, no weapons, no direct orders to commit crimes. The foundation wasn't a physical tunnel, it was a proof of concept, that even the most secure prisons could be used as information relays if staff, contractors and legal channels weren't airtight. A demonstration, not a jailbreak. For days the story dominated headlines. Advocacy groups cited the leaked documents in petitions against long-term solitary confinement. International outlets ran side-by-side footage of ADX Florence's sterile corridors and Tocorón's bizarre amenities. Commentators contrasted Pelican Bay's hunger strike reforms with Venezuela's armed raid. Even former correctional officers went on record describing the pressure and burnout of working in isolation units. Congressional hearings began the following week. Claire Monroe, the DOJ analyst who had first flagged the codes months earlier, testified that supermax didn't mean infallible. Families of Pelican Bay inmates described decades of sensory deprivation. Venezuelan journalists described how Tocorón had operated as a parallel city until 2023. A U.S. contractor denied wrongdoing but admitted its logos were on crates seized during the riot. The spectacle was unprecedented. Emily and Carla watched from a balcony as senators held up blown-up images of Pelican Bay's SHU, ADX's outdoor pens, Tocorón's nightclubs. The words "worst maximum security prisons" flashed across every Chiron. Emily realized their investigation had become more than a story. It was a turning point. But the aftermath was not clean. Online, conspiracy forums spun wild theories about tunnels and escapes, claims Emily and Carla knew were untrue. They stuck to verified facts in every interview, reminding viewers that the leaks had revealed vulnerabilities and corruption, not a Hollywood-style breakout. Still, they received threats. Anonymous emails accused them of betraying the system. One contained a single sentence: "You've built a new foundation." On a cold March morning, Emily returned to Florence to stand outside ADX one last time. The snow had melted, revealing the barren plain around the compound. She saw trucks coming and going under heavier scrutiny than before, guards checking crates, contractors wearing new ID badges. The Bureau had quietly suspended several staff and launched an audit of all legal mail handling. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. She took a final photograph of the prison under the rising sun. It looked the same, gray walls, razor wire towers, but she knew the image on the public screen had changed forever. For the first time, the fortress had been forced to show its seams. Carla joined her, breath visible in the cold air. "We didn't stop it," she said softly. "We just showed it." Emily lowered her camera. "Sometimes that's the only way to make people look." They stood in silence as a siren wailed faintly inside the compound, then died away. Somewhere behind those walls, men were still serving sentences in tiny concrete boxes. In Venezuela, families were still grappling with the aftermath of the Tocorón raid. The systems would not transform overnight. But the myth of perfect control had been punctured. Emily opened her notebook and wrote the closing line of her next piece. From Colorado to California to Aragua State, the world's worst maximum security prisons have been exposed not by escape, but by information. She underlined the last word. For a moment she felt the weight of the story lift. A gust of wind blew across the plain, rattling the fence. Emily turned to Carla. "Ready?" Carla nodded. They walked back to their car, leaving the fortress behind. Back in Denver that evening, Emily uploaded her final footage and drafted the outro for her video. If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it, because the darkest secrets are still hidden in plain sight. She hit publish, and watched as the first comments rolled in. People from the US, Europe, and Latin America were sharing their own experiences, linking to official reports, debating reforms. For once, the comment section felt less like voyeurism and more like accountability. Somewhere in an office in Washington, a staffer printed a memo with a new header: Global Review of Maximum Security Facilities, Lessons from ADX, Pelican Bay, Tocorón. And in an unmarked envelope on Emily's doorstep the next morning was a blank sheet of graph paper with no codes, no drawings, just a small stamped symbol of a cracked wall. She smiled, unsure whether it was a warning or a thank you.